Welcome to the Empowered Flow podcast. I'm Tris Alexandra, holistic clinical nutritionist, women's health and menstrual cycle educator, and mama. Join me and experts in nutrition, fitness, mindset, and holistic healing as we explore conversations to open your mind to a different way of thinking on all things women's health, hormones, periods, cyclical living, and fertility. Whether you're seeking knowledge, inspiration, or a supportive community, you've found your tribe. Let's dive in. Hello, beautiful humans. Tris here for a solo episode, and today I'm going to be talking all about syncing your cycle. So I'm going to share with you how the menstrual cycle is our fifth vital sign of health. What is the Infradian rhythm? What is menstrual cycle awareness and tracking? How you can use cycle tracking for fertility or natural contraception, our 4 phases of our menstrual cycle, and what is cycle syncing or cyclical living and how you can use that to take control of your hormone health and to optimize your overall health. So let's start with our menstrual cycle being considered a 5th vital sign of health. So just like our blood pressure, our respiratory rate, our pulse, our menstrual cycle can give us a lot of understanding into our overall health. It can tell us about our reproductive health, our nervous system health, our thyroid function, metabolism, and more. And that's because, and I'll talk about what the Infradian rhythm is, but the Infradian rhythm impacts many body systems. Menstrual cycle awareness is the practice of learning about your unique menstrual cycle. And it's a daily practice where you're monitoring what day and what phase of your cycle you're currently in and how you're experiencing that day. So yes, it is about tracking your period and tracking ovulation and potentially even using natural fertility awareness methods. So I teach the symptothermal method where we're tracking basal body temperature and cervical mucus changes. So it is about cycle tracking, but it's deeper than that. It's about your unique cycle and how you're experiencing it, so that you can understand the fluctuations of your hormones and how it impacts your energy, your mood, your productivity, your creativity, and more. And you can then use that knowledge to empower yourself in all sorts of ways. So it's not about thinking, oh, I have a fluctuation of hormones across the cycle, and day 1 of my menstrual cycle means I'm going to have low energy and low hormones, and that's going to be a burden to me. It's not about that. It's actually about understanding how you might feel through each of those phases and using that to your advantage. You're really like harnessing the power of your hormones. It's like more like, I know in this phase of my cycle, I feel my most confident, or I feel my most productive. And so I'm going to do these kind of tasks around that phase. Or I know in this phase of my menstrual cycle, I feel my strongest and my most energetic, and I know my body can handle more with exercise. So I'm going to go for a PB, or I'm going to add in more of that intense exercise. Whereas you may find that if you did that on day 2 of your menstrual cycle or of your period, you're going to feel incredibly fatigued afterwards. Now, I want to introduce you to the Infradian rhythm. So you may have heard of the circadian rhythm, which is the body's 24-hour internal clock, and that regulates our internal organs and like our wake-sleep cycles, right? And both females and males have a circadian rhythm. Now, unlike males, females also have an Infradian rhythm. So maybe you've heard this term before, but the Infradian rhythm is our approximate 28-day cycle, and it influences the brain, our metabolism, our gut microbiome, our immune system, our nervous system, which is our stress response, and our reproductive system. So the Infradian rhythm is what influences the hormones of the menstrual cycle and causes you to ovulate at a certain time and causes your period to happen at a certain time. The Infradian rhythm is really our body's second clock, and it's like coordinating that production and fluctuation of hormones. Now, because the Infradian rhythm and our menstrual cycle impacts so many different body systems, that means our energy, our physical strength and stamina, our emotions, our stress resilience, our focus, productivity, sleep, digestive function, and body temperature differ through each phase of the menstrual cycle or across that approximate 28 days, because not every healthy menstrual cycle is exactly 28 days. It can be normal to have a cycle that's anywhere from 25 to 35 days, I think, is considered healthy and normal, provided there's nothing going on underlying that's creating signs and symptoms of dysfunction. So now that we understand what menstrual cycle awareness is and what the Infradian rhythm is, and that menstrual cycle awareness is tracking your cycle, but it's deeper than that, I guess the question is like, what are the benefits to actually tracking your cycle? So yes, it's about having a deeper understanding of what's going on in your unique body, and to really, like, I kind of liken it as like you're being the expert in your body. But some other benefits mean that of like tracking your cycle and having this menstrual cycle awareness is that it helps you discover your unique patterns and understand your overall health. So you're understanding whether, like, is your menstrual cycle a length that is considered healthy? Is your period and how many days your period goes from, what the flow is like, is that considered healthy? Or is there signs and symptoms across that cycle that is indicating potentially something underlying, like a hormonal imbalance or something underlying that needs more support? The other benefits of tracking and cycle awareness is for fertility. So you can pinpoint ovulation and your fertile window, and you can use this to either help you conceive or for natural contraception method. So if you're avoiding pregnancy. So this is, I guess, known as fertility awareness-based methods. And it's just identifying that, hey, it's identifying when your fertile window and ovulation is, but that, oh, hey, I can't actually fall pregnant on every single day of my cycle. Just to give you like a bit of an overview, like of how effective that is in comparison to, say, using birth control methods, fertility-based awareness methods have been found in studies to be as effective as some hormonal contraceptives. So one study found the symptothermal method, which is the method that I teach, to be 99.4 to 99.6 effective in avoiding pregnancy with perfect use. So that is based on proper use and not making any errors, but 98 to 99% effective in typical use. So that kind of allows for that error and the whoopsies, I got that day kind of not quite right, or didn't quite track my cycle correctly. Now, in comparison, the combined oral contraceptive pill is 99.7% effective with perfect use and 92% effective with typical use. So that's accounting for like accidentally missing pills or other things that can affect the absorption of the pill and potentially lower the effectiveness of it. So fertility awareness is a really great one for tracking your cycle. The other benefit can be just discovering signs and symptoms that might indicate hormonal imbalances or the need for further investigations and support. It can also be really helpful for monitoring the impact of your nutrition and lifestyle changes. So if you have made some changes, I always say it takes at least 3 months to notice significant changes to your menstrual cycles and periods from any changes you've made. And that's because it takes 100 days for your follicles to mature from their dormant state to be ready for ovulation. All right. And that process of maturation and that process of our menstrual cycle and fluctuation of hormones can be impacted by our overall health, our nutrition, our lifestyle, our emotional health, stress, environmental exposures, and so much more. So it's just helpful for, I guess, monitoring any of those changes and seeing how it's improving your menstrual cycle. And cycle tracking also helps you feel prepared to manage, I say like, not manage, but like it helps you feel prepared with your emotional health or any, emotions and mood fluctuations across the cycle. So it is normal to feel different through different phases of your menstrual cycle and on different days. That doesn't mean that it should be as extreme as, like some really extreme sort of emotional symptoms or mood changes or mental health concerns. It's not as extreme as that, but we do have different cyclical patterns across the cycle to how we are feeling emotionally and energetically, and that is normal as well. Now, I want to bust some myths about the menstrual cycle and things that we're not taught, because if you're anything like me or like I was, your knowledge of your menstrual cycle before I knew any of this information was probably just centered around having a monthly period and using some form of contraception all the time if you want to avoid pregnancy. We're not taught much as females. We don't pass down that information anymore. So as you start to learn this, tell your girlfriends, tell your sisters. This is really important information to get out there so we can all feel empowered with our health and understand our bodies more. But something that most females don't know is that every menstrual cycle is unique. So your cycle is going to be different to my cycle. And even from one cycle to the next, you might experience that slightly differently as well. I'm not talking about the signs and symptoms of hormone imbalances, but I'm just talking about a normal, healthy menstrual cycle. You may still experience slight differences with how you experience every day in your cycle. And that's why when it comes to, I'm going to talk about the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, but I always say what's most important is I can teach you about how your hormones are going to fluctuate in each phase and how you might feel. But what's most important is you checking in with yourself and understanding how you're feeling right now, because that may differ from cycle to cycle. I'm going off on a tangent, but just busting those myths and sort of talking about, what we're not taught about our cycles is that not every healthy menstrual cycle is exactly 28 days. So it's actually can be considered normal to have a 25 to 35 day cycle, provided that it's not causing dysfunction. Not every female ovulates on day 14, which means your period tracker app is not actually completely accurate at predicting ovulation, even if you have a 28-day cycle, because when you ovulate until your next period can be from 10 to 14 days. And period tracker apps just assume that phase is 14 days. So you might actually be slightly off. So you shouldn't, I always say, don't use a period tracker app if you're either trying to fall pregnant, you really need to observe the signs and symptoms of your body, or trying to avoid pregnancy, because if it's not accurate, you're missing that fertile window. The other thing to be aware of is that a regular menstrual cycle doesn't always guarantee that ovulation is occurring every single time. It is normal to have 1 or 2 cycles a year without ovulating. So it's called an anovulatory cycle, where you actually have a cycle, you don't ovulate, and then you still get a period. It can just be a one-off here and there, and that can be considered normal. If anovulation or not ovulating is happening often, then it's a sign and symptom of dysfunction. What else? We can only potentially fall pregnant for 6 to 7 days of each cycle. So just consider that for a moment when you're thinking about natural contraception or trying to fall pregnant. We can't actually fall pregnant on every single day of our cycle. And the other thing I want you to know is that symptoms like irregular periods, missing periods, PMS type symptoms, heavy or painful periods, low libido, insatiable cravings, mood challenges, skin breakouts, weight gain, hormonal conditions like PCOS, these all might be common, but they're not normal, and you don't have to put up with it. I cannot tell you how many women that I've seen that have struggled with heavy, painful periods and just thought it was normal, because their friends have heavy, painful periods, or they've gone to the doctor and been told, oh no, your tests all look quote unquote fine. You're just a woman and you just have a period and you just have to deal with it. No. Yes, you are, like I've mentioned, you're going to feel slightly different through each phase of your cycle. Yes, when your period comes, you may feel that. You may get a little bit of cramping. You may get a little bit of discomfort or a little bit of bloating. But if you are experiencing any signs and symptoms that is affecting your quality of life, it's not normal and you don't have to put up with it. I want you to also think, if you are someone who's experiencing signs and symptoms throughout your menstrual cycle, it doesn't mean your body's broken. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. I know that I felt like that for a really long time. Take it as signals from your body that your hormones are a little out of whack and that you need further support. And The promising thing and the positive thing is that you can actually rebalance your hormones and bring your cycles back into balance, resolve symptoms, have a healthy menstrual cycle and a healthy period that's not causing you to not causing it to affect your quality of life. And you can do that naturally. You can do it using nutrition, lifestyle strategies, self-care practices, and those things are going to be your most powerful tool to supporting your hormonal health and your optimal health. So you don't have to dread your period. Our menstrual cycle, our menstrual cycle and our hormones, we can really use it to our advantage. Something I want you to think about is that as females, we are cyclical beings and we live in a linear world. We live in a world that is essentially, I kind of don't like phrasing it like this, but essentially designed for men who have a circadian rhythm and who function the same day after day. As women, we are cyclical and we do not function the same day after day. And when we stop working against our body by doing the same thing every day and instead start living more cyclically and having this awareness of our cycles and syncing our cycles, so using nutrition like eating, moving, living in ways that support the phases of our menstrual cycle and support the production and fluctuation of hormones across the menstrual cycle, we feel healthier. We feel our best. We reduce and resolve symptoms. It can be really supportive in avoiding burnout and fatigue, but also it's really supportive in knowing where you function your best and what you're best at through each phase of your menstrual cycle. Now, of course, we can do anything anytime. I'm never going to be one to stand up and say, it's day 1 of your period, you shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z, because ultimately it comes down to how you're feeling. But we are physically and energetically different through each day in our cycle and each phase in our cycle because of our hormones. And so we can use that to our advantage. It means that, the HIIT workout that you've done or the intense exercise session that you've done is going to feel really different and your body's going to respond differently if you are on day 2 of your cycle and having a heavy bleed day compared to around when you're ovulating. You're going to feel like, if you think about your libido, naturally you're going to have a lot higher libido around your fertile window and around ovulation, because that's when our body's like, I'm ready to make a baby, let's do this. So it is, when it comes to actually making some tweaks and changes to nutrition and lifestyle practices, it's not about I can't do this at that phase of my cycle. It's just about how can I best utilize this phase of my cycle to feel my best and to avoid that burnout and fatigue. So menstrual cycle awareness and cycle syncing really means optimizing our overall health, optimizing fertility. It means harnessing the times of our cycle where we are more productive, more creative. It means using our cycles to reach our fitness goals with more ease. It means tapping into our intuition and even using our cycles for personal growth and transformation. I know that the more awareness I have around my menstrual cycle and around how I feel each day, the better I can run my business, and I will actually change the types of things that I work on in or on my business depending on where I am at my cycle. I will also slightly change things like my nutrition so that I'm really supporting and giving my body the nutrients it needs through each of those phases. I will adjust my exercise, like if I am in my follicular phase or getting close to ovulation, I know that's a really good time that I feel really strong and that I'm going to add extra weights. I'm going to try for a personal best on a lift. I'm going to add in a little bit more HIIT training because I know my body can handle it. Whereas for me, if I'm in my late luteal phase, closer to my period, and I smash myself in an intense workout session, I will feel like absolute rubbish from it and I won't recover. So it's not worth it. It's not worth it for me to do that. I can do that at other times when I feel really good for it, and it's actually going to have a positive impact on my fitness and on my recovery. So let's dive into the 4 phases of your menstrual cycle. Now, something I want you to know is that there's a lot to this. There's a lot to understanding your menstrual cycle, to getting like a bit of a grasp on tracking your cycle, particularly when it comes to using like the symptothermal method or fertility awareness-based methods. So it takes time. It takes time to understand your cycle and the signs of each phase of your cycle, how you feel in each phase. It takes time to identify if there's actually symptoms going on that may or may not be normal. And then to using your cycle or using cycle tracking for either helping you fall pregnant or as a natural contraception method. So yeah, I just don't want you to go away and think that like, yep, I'm just going to track my cycle once and I'm going to know everything that's going on and I'm going to feel really confident about it, because you probably won't, and that's okay and that's normal. It just takes time and it takes practice. I'm going to talk about at the end, I am actually going to run a masterclass on how to do this effectively, like how to track effectively. So I'll talk about that. But what I wanted to give you was an overview of the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle so that you can start to think about how that feels for you, how each of your phases of your menstrual cycle feels for you. Now, I will just touch on this, but I won't dive into it. But each of those phases of the menstrual cycle, you can liken it to the seasons. So the actual summer, winter, spring, autumn, each of those seasonal phases are similar to the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. And then also the moon phases, the lunar cycle, how we feel through the lunar cycle is similar to how we feel through, like it is linked to those different phases of the menstrual cycle as well. It doesn't mean that everyone's cycle actually links up with the moon phases, but for a lot of women it does. But I just want you to sort of grasp that understanding. It also means, like with the lunar phases, if you have a very irregular cycle, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding and don't have a cycle, or perimenopause or postmenopause, you can actually use the lunar phases to still live cyclically and still have that like cycle awareness and use cycle syncing, but you'll just be following the lunar phases instead of your own menstrual cycle. So I hope I haven't just confused things even further, because like I said, I'm just kind of giving you that overview and that understanding of it. So let's dive into each of those phases of the menstrual cycle. And as I talk about this, like I said, I want you to understand that your own experience of how you experience of each of these phases and each day is more important than what I'm about to teach you. So always check in with yourself. So we'll start with the menstruation phase. So menstruation, when your period starts, day 1 of your period is the first day of your full bleed. So if you experience like a day or 2 of spotting before your period, that's not your period. That's not day 1. Day 1 of your menstrual cycle, day 1 of your period is the first day of your full bleed. Now, the menstruation phase, you could kind of consider it starting just before you bleed, like the day before. And the reason for that is because it's actually the day before that hormones drop. So estrogen and progesterone drops, and that's what causes causes your period to start. And so how you experience the day before your period starts is very similar to your actual period or to those first couple of days because of those hormonal shifts and changes. Now, consider the menstruation phase like winter. So think about, how do you feel in winter? We tend to feel more inward. We tend to want to be indoors and not be as social. Some other things to know about this phase is it's actually a really good time for surrender, to let go of what no longer serves us, to reconnect to ourselves and consider what we want to bring into our life and into our next cycle, but also to rest and refuel. So really important time to like nourish your body, give back to your body, add in a little bit more self-care practice. Don't be so like full on with exercise. Doesn't mean you can't go to the gym. Doesn't mean you can't exercise. Again, check in with yourself, but it's really a time for rest and refuel. And we can do that in all sorts of ways. The next phase is our follicular phase. So follicular phase starts from when our period ends and goes until ovulation. So there's a little bit of crossover with the follicular phase and ovulation phase, but just consider the next phase, your follicular phase, from when your period ends until ovulation. And this is like the season of spring. So think about how spring feels for you. Our energy rises in this phase. So estrogen's rising in this phase and our energy rises with that. We might get like ideas that start to blossom. We might be more creative, more productive, have more focus. We can get a lot done in the follicular phase. We can also handle a lot more when it comes to things like exercise, and we're more stress resilient. So yeah, that's our follicular phase. We then have our ovulation phase. So ovulation, it's like summer. It's like the height of everything, the peak of everything. And ovulation phase, you can also consider it like full moon. Like everything is just, it's like the peak of our energy, the peak of our libido, our confidence. We're highly social. We want to be out in the world. We want to be celebrating. We want to be doing all of the things around ovulation. Now, ovulation is just one event. It's just one day. We ovulate, and then within 24 hours, either the egg's fertilized, or if it's not fertilized, then 10 to 14 days later, we get a period. But our actual fertile window sits around ovulation. So it's like leading up to ovulation, we'll start to get signs, and then we ovulate, and then our fertile window closes like 24 hours after ovulation. That means if you are thinking about pregnancy, or you are using like natural contraception methods and you're not on birth control, or like trying to avoid pregnancy, then you really need to really understand that fertile window and when you ovulate, and you need to pinpoint ovulation not from an app, but actually from the signs and symptoms that your body gives you. And that's where the symptothermal method comes in and cycle tracking comes in. After ovulation, we head into the luteal phase. So from ovulation until your next period, which is a 10 to 14 day period of time, is our luteal phase. And in that phase, we get progesterone being produced. Now, progesterone is a really great hormone. It's only produced after ovulation occurs. So we don't really have much, if any, progesterone any other times of the cycle. And this is where the luteal phase, I kind of think it's our inner autumn. But it's kind of the phase where I find a lot of women, particularly if there is hormonal imbalances, that they struggle in this phase. It's can feel really rocky, and signs and symptoms can pop up. Mood changes can be particularly late luteal phase, we can get a lot of mood changes. We can get a lot of emotional changes. We can hunger changes as well, because progesterone it increases our metabolism, so we get more hungry. So it can be really hard for women who, for example, are trying to lose weight or trying to make some changes to their nutrition. Our luteal phase is also the time in our cycle that our inner critic pops up. So it's like the time, you might resonate with this, but for me, it's the time where I start going like, oh, I'm failing at everything. Nothing's working. Everything feels so hard. And I, particularly close to my period, I'll start to feel a little bit more like teary, or I might be teary about something that I wouldn't normally be upset about. And I'm like, what is going on with my life? And then my period comes and I'm like, oh, that all makes sense. Life makes sense right now. The other thing to know about the luteal phase is that because progesterone is rising, we really need to use nutrition to support the production of progesterone, but we also need to have a lot of self-care practices and things that help us to manage our stress, because cortisol, our stress hormone, is made from progesterone. So what that means is that the more stressed we are in this phase, the more that progesterone is taken to make cortisol, and then we miss out on the real benefits of progesterone. So that's an overview of our 4 menstrual cycle phases. I hope that's really helpful in giving you a deeper understanding. But like I said, there is a lot to it. So if that kind of sparks your interest and you're like, yes, I want to learn more. I need to know how to, accurately track my cycle. I want to learn the symptothermal method so that I can either use it for fertility or use it for natural contraception method. I want to know what's normal versus what's not normal in my cycle, like what signs and red flags to look out for. Then come along to my upcoming online masterclass. So it's called Sync Your Cycle. It is going to be live on Wednesday, the 10th of April at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, so Melbourne time. I will record it if you can't make it live, but I totally encourage you to come live because I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to make it interactive. It means you'll have me there to ask questions as well. And I'm really going to teach you the how to really track your cycle and have that menstrual cycle awareness. Some of the other things I'll talk about is like femtech. So like what you could use to track your cycle. So whether that be an app and any of the wearables, so like how to track your temperature and the things that you can use for that. I'm going to talk about the fertile window and ovulation and considerations for pregnancy and natural contraception methods. So maybe you're coming off the pill, or maybe, you want to use natural contraception, or maybe you want to fall pregnant. That's going to be really helpful for you. And I'm also going to do a deeper dive into those 4 phases of the cycle. And use it in picture form because I'm a real visual learner. So I'll help you sort of see the fluctuation of hormones and teach you about what is happening hormonally, physically, energetically, but then also how to actually use cycle syncing. So what changes to your nutrition, your exercise, and health, self-care that you can use to support the balance of your hormones and optimize your health. So I will share a link to the Sync Your Cycle Masterclass in the show notes if you're interested. You can also use the code EMPOWERED, so EMPOWERED, EMPOWERED, to get a discount on that masterclass for listening into the podcast. All right, beautiful humans, thank you so much for listening in. If you found this episode really helpful, I'd love you to share it with a friend or a sister, someone that is going to really benefit from understanding more about their hormones, their cycle, and their body. Thanks for joining us on the Empowered Flow podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I'd love you to share it with a friend and take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support means the world and fuels our mission to empower women everywhere. You can also reach out to me on Instagram at TrisAlexandraNutrition. Sending big love. I'll catch you in the next episode.